I'd like to briefly introduce who's going to be with you today. I think we all know Mr. Reinhart, who's to my right, who is the CEO and Executive Director of the Virginia Port Authority. John leads the colleagues at the port to deliver superior service, safe transport, and continuous improvement. And the mission of the port is to foster and stimulate the commerce of the ports of the Commonwealth and to serve the Eastern Seaboard Gateway for global import and export of freight throughout the world. Thank you for joining us. To Mr. Reinhardt's right is Bjorn Fischer, who is currently the Vice President of Steel, but beginning in January 1 will assume the position of President. Mr. Fischer is a native of South Africa with 25 years of global experience in finance and logistics. He serves on the Regional Board of Directors with the Hampton Roads Chamber of Commerce, is very involved in the Dean's Executive Advisory Council for Old Dominion School of Business, College of Business. Welcome. To Mr. Fischer's right is Mr. Mike Scahill. He's Vice President of Global Affairs for the Smithfield Foods International Group. Mr. Scahill plays a key role in driving forward and supporting the work all the way underway in the development of policies and strategies to engage governments, multilateral organizations, which I look forward to hearing about, and other key stakeholders in international markets that are strategic to Smithfield Foods. Welcome. Finally, we have Keith Merlin, and Mr. Merlin, I have a hard time calling you that since you're a Major General. So General Merlin is President of the Washington Airports Task Force. He served 28 years with the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority, where 16 years he was Vice President and Airport Manager. General Merlin is also a Major General retired in the U.S. Air Force, where he served on active duty, the Air National Guard, and the Reserves, and is a pilot and flew the KC-135, the C-7, and C-130 aircraft. So welcome. What I'd like to do, gentlemen, is if we could start with Mr. Reinhart, just give a brief overview of your company and its involvement in international trade, and we'll work to our right, and then we'll get this panel going.
Well, thank you very much, Clark. As you know, the Port of Virginia is aligned in three businesses. We have the Virginia Port Authority, and we have Virginia International Terminals, followed by HRCP2, which is a chassis provider. So we at the Port of Virginia run all of those enterprises. What we try to do is open the gateways for all of our good customers sitting here to move their cargo in and out of the Port of Virginia. We have 6 facilities, 4 deep water here in Hampton Road, 2 are inland facilities, one in Front Royal, we call VIP, and the second is the Port of Richmond, which we are entering a long-term lease for 40 years to run that facility, and I think it ties to creating a mega region and connecting Richmond and this area, which would get us up over the largest area for trade, I think, on export. So we have a good team. We've been growing. Last year we were profitable for the first time in many years. And what we're trying to do now is put forward a classic investment plan so that we can stay in step with the growth of export and import. One thing I'd like to say when we talk about export, the Port of Virginia has 54.5% of our business is export. We're one of the most balanced ports in the United States as far as the amount of cargo that we export or import. So that's a good advantage for the Port of Virginia, and we want to continue to drive that as we go forward.
Bjorn?
Thank you. The Steel Group is a family-owned business that develops, manufactures, and distributes auto power equipment for the professional, but also for the homeowner market. What began in 1926 when Andreas Steel invented the first electric chainsaw now is a worldwide organization selling and servicing our product through 40,000 dealers in over 160 countries across the world. But over 40 years ago, Steel established its US headquarters right here in Virginia Beach. Our US distribution network consists of 12 regional distribution centers who only sell through 8,500 servicing dealers, not mass merchants, making it pretty unique in our industry. So what started with about 50 employees over 40 years ago, today is 2,100 dedicated employees here in the United States, most of them right here in Virginia Beach. In addition to covering the US market though, we manufacture products and components here in Virginia Beach that we export to the rest of the world. Over 90 countries are served from here. And in fact, just on one of those comments, we export more TEUs than we import. So we obviously need to import some components, but we export more than we import through the port here. Our manufacturing operations in Virginia Beach are the largest within the steel group. In order to maintain our high level of quality and maintain competitive advantage, we have a very highly automated and vertically integrated production facility. So a large percentage of the components that go into our products are actually also made right here in Virginia Beach, from plastics to pistons to crankshafts. We actually manufacture those right here. So not only is the majority of the equipment that we sell in the USA made right here, but export actually makes up a very large proportion of our revenue stream.
Mike?
Thank you. To Bjorn's credit, my wife can actually start a steel gas blower, which is important in the autumn. So she's blowing leaves. But anyway, it's good to be here today. I want to briefly give you an overview of Smithfield Foods, but then I want to give a little bit of macro feel of our industry and our exports and how important pork exports is to U.S. agriculture and to Virginia agriculture. Again, I want to thank Virginia Chamber for hosting this event this afternoon. Again, we're proud to be a Virginia-based company in Isle of Wight County in Smithfield, Virginia. We have over $15 billion in sales in the United States. We're vertically integrated, which means we are farm to fork, and therefore be able to ensure safety and traceability to our consumers. Smithfield Foods is the #1 largest hog producer, not only in the United States, but in the world. We're the #1 largest pork producer, not only in the United States, but in the world, and we're the largest U.S. packaged meat company. In hog production, we own approximately 900,000 sows. Sows are mother pigs, and we produce about 16 million pigs annually. In the United States, we have 8 plants that harvest about 116,000 pigs per day, and we produce 31 million hogs annually. That is about 25% of the U.S. production is operated by Smithfield Foods. Our brands are important to us. They rank #1 in numerous categories, from hot dogs to bacon to Smithfield Genuine Smithfield hams. We produce 3.1 billion pounds of processed pork products. Our plant that produces hot dog produces enough hot dogs in 1 year to circle the globe 3 times. We are the largest exporter of pork in the United States. We want to, and I want to make some comments specifically on trade and how important exports are to trade. We export approximately 25% of all pork in the United States. So in your terms, we export about 1 out of every 4 pigs gets exported in the United States. So that's a lot of product. We export the items that you and I traditionally eat, but we also export items that we don't traditionally eat here in the United States, primarily to the lucrative Asia market. And we've all eaten, so it's the organ meat, it's the snoots, it's feet, it's items like that we need to find export markets for to add value to hog producers and to the meat production. Exports are also very important to live pig producers. About 1/3 of the value of the live pig is attributed to exports. Therefore, we could say that if we didn't have exports, pig producers, hog producers in the United States would be getting about 1/3 less for their animals. It's really important to Smithfield, and it's most important to America's hog producers. Also, when we export pork, we also are exporting grain. We traditionally grow our pigs to about 300 pounds live, and a live animal, at the time it meets its maker, it has consumed about 700 pounds of grain, U.S. grain. It's primarily corn and U.S. soybean meal. So for every animal, about 700 pounds of grain. Last year, we exported 2.1 million metric tons of pork. That's almost 5 billion pounds. Our largest markets are Mexico, Japan, with 127 million consumers, compared to 321 million in the United States. We all talk about China, especially at Smithfield, we talk about China. With 1.3 billion consumers. and has a study references emerging middle class consumers. And they consume in China 52% of all the pork consumed in the world is consumed in China. And then we have Canada and Korea. From 2003, we've witnessed a 300% growth in pork exports. That's just phenomenal. So why is U.S. pork trade, meat trade important to us? Well, again, has a reference studies, the rising middle class, especially in Asia and South America. We're seeing decreased production in these developing countries. U.S. pork is efficient, is of good value. We are efficient producers. We have a low-cost production in the United States. And also, as we're working on free trade agreements, whether it's NAFTA, the current Korea Free Trade Agreement, and Colombia, these markets are very important for us. Currently, a couple negatives we have is the dollar. Strong dollar is hurting us internationally. This year, something that very important message for us is a labor dispute on the West Coast. Had huge impact on our industry, huge impact on Smithfield Foods as we were trying to get product off the West Coast and caused further disruptions here on the East Coast as product moved from the West to the East. The Russia embargo was one of our top 5 markets was Russia. Their current embargo on product from the United States and Europe and non-tariff trade barriers. So the future is important. This year we have 8% more pork in the United States. We're raising more animals, we're raising heavier animals, and we have to export. It brings me into the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which Clark referenced, which the study references. Very, very important for us for access into the Pacific Rim countries. I myself am very involved with USTR on this. These markets are very lucrative for U.S. pork, especially Japan and Vietnam. We hope that will be finalized by the end of the year or early 2016, which will bring us into the Transatlantic Free Trade Agreement with Europe, which promises to be an even bigger bridge for us to export our items out of the Port of Virginia into the lucrative European market. And maybe Bjorn can help me here, but we're trying to open up South Africa. I heard you're a native of South Africa. Our meat items are banned in South Africa. We're working very closely with the government of South Africa through our new AGOA agreement with South Africa to open up the lucrative South Africa market for us. So in closing here, just a few key takeaways. Again, the port's very close to the proximity of our production facilities. These ports in Virginia are key to our exports and our gateway to export markets through the Panama Canal to the emerging Asian markets. The Port of Virginia handles about 12,500 40-foot containers of meat and poultry each year, which about 5,000 of those belong to Smithfield. Therefore, we account for about 40% of all the meat and poultry that moves through the Port of Virginia. It's a big number. Overall, we estimate that 1 out of every 100 containers that moves through Virginia out of this port is from Smithfield. That seems small, but keep in mind, Smithfield Foods is one of the top 40 companies in the United States that export from the United States. So in closing, again, it's good to be here, and move it on to you. Thank you.
General, before you start, the thought of hot dogs circling the globe is, I'm having a hard time with it, but that was great. Thank you. General?
I tell you, in preparing for this and reading the study, the one thing that scared the absolute hell out of me was following Smithfield Ham. Because we don't produce anything, and I'm here from Washington to help. But the Washington Airports Task Force was formed by a group of local businessmen up in Northern Virginia in the early 80s. And it was formed because they had an airport out there, Dulles Airport, which had 11,000 acres and only had about 2.5 million passengers, and it was sorely underused. So they got together and they formed an association called the Washington Airports Task Force, mainly as an economic development entity, to try to bring business, bring air carrier service to Dulles, and then improve the economy, add jobs, and the rest is sort of history. When I retired in 2005, we had 27 million passengers. Cargo was going well as could be expected. Our board represents over 1,000 different businesses up there, We also receive and the board members, I call it pay to play, on there and participate with it. We also receive grants from the Commonwealth of Virginia, the counties of Fairfax, Loudoun, and Prince William, and the town of Herndon. So they see it in their infinite, and the best interest of theirs to join us, and also as we do that. We try to encourage and get additional air service. We try to make a balanced air service between National and Dulles. Both those are part of the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority. And the other thing is we try to work on cargo. Cargo represents about 20% of an airline's profit in its belly load. And so that can either make or break the decision on an airline whether they're going to serve that market or not. We also operate the foreign trade zone up there, which is just a small little gnat of what you folks do down here in your foreign trade zone. But it is important, and it's a great benefit for a number of companies moving to our area. So that's the Washington Airports Task Force.
Great. John, let's start with you. Based on the study that you looked at and Barry's comments, what global trends do you see the port facing as we go forward?
Well, first of all, we've been on a 3-year run of growth year over year over year. And as I mentioned before, the split with export to import, we're growing both of those this year at 9%. So what we have to do is continue to create the capacity to move the products of Smithfield and still across our ports in an efficient way, because we're part of their cost, we're part of their supply chain. So we have to really focus on capital infrastructure at the port. There was a lot written last year about congestion at the port, and we were congested. So now our focus is trying to show that we can move all of this freight today efficiently, but also have a 10-year, 20-year, 30-year plan to keep up with that growth. Because as the report stated, 81% of the disposable income is overseas. 95% of the population is overseas. So we have to just connect the world to Virginia and Virginia to the world. So that's our focus, trying to drive the port forward to meet and keep up with the pace of growth that we see continuing. One other quick point. Bayonne Bridge goes up this year and the Panama Canal opens. When those two limiters to the north and the south are removed, we will see 14,000 TEU ships coming to our port, where today there are 9,000. So that creates huge capacity coming to the East Coast. We have this natural harbor that can handle it and no overhead restrictions, but we don't have the landside infrastructure yet. So we're running as hard as we can to build up that infrastructure. And then we're blessed to get the products to the inland or the heartland, to have 2 Class 1 railroads, Norfolk Southern, CSX, double stack with Norfolk Southern, to have double stack with CSX, because 33.5% of every bit of cargo that comes in or out of this port moves by rail. So you have to look at the intermodal connectors that we need to tie up to help drive trade across the Commonwealth and beyond.
Bjorn?
Well, I think the study, and we've heard a few comments of how Virginia competes also with other states in the U.S. I'd like to add a perspective that if you look at our manufacturing jobs that we have right here, we compete with the rest of the world. So when we produce something, we have to compete with that unit being produced elsewhere in the world. So it's much more complex, and I think the competitive environment is obviously accelerating. If we look at some of the trends outside of the study, I think it was mentioned earlier, the exchange rate, the strong dollar has hurt us tremendously as exporters here, probably in the last year. I mean, we've lost a lot of competitiveness in the shortest period of time that we're trying to make up. I think, John, you just mentioned everything that helps a company by making life easier for us, from better infrastructure, moving product through here faster, more reliable, more efficiently, to less regulation, to a better tax structure, whatever helps us, all supports us. Now, from a steel perspective, how do we try and respond to that? How do we try and compete with organizations in other parts of the world? Well, I think what we do, and what we do really well in this region, we have well-qualified and skilled employees. We have, I think, the best in the nation. So we have access to really good employees here, and we as a company invest tremendously in our employees. And that has actually allowed us to also automate our operation. Not only are we highly, highly automated, but we also have a very vertical integration of our manufacturing. You need good employees to be able to drive such an organization so they actually feed with each other. And that's allowed us to build up an employee base with an average of 10 years of tenure in our factory, but also in our office environment. And so while we've automated over all these years, we've always focused on our workforce and reinvesting in our workforce and have not compromised our workforce for the sake of automation. So I think that's how we try and combat, but everything that helps a business be more efficient, I think really does support us. And again, the competition is a global one.
Mike, you mentioned some. What are the global trends that you see?
Well, again, our global trends, in the meat industry is primarily we ship a frozen product out of the Port of Virginia, but we're seeing our global trends in our industry shifting to more processed meat, which will be a shelf life, fresh pork, which will have a shelf life. So then it's much more imperative that we move these goods in and out of this port on a much more efficient basis. So again, it goes back to Bjorn's comments that, improving efficiency, turnaround time at these ports is going to be vital, especially as we open up these markets under the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Transatlantic Free Trade Agreement. Also, I'll go back to a comment I made earlier, the West Coast port strike. Again, the ability, if we get into that type of a situation again, knock on wood, the ability for these East Coast ports, particularly Virginia, to handle a major overflow of products to be exported out of this country. And that was, again, very, very important for us, and certainly not a good start for our 2015 fiscal year.
Keith?
What we've seen on the airport side, and especially up in Northern Virginia, and they've talked about it before, is you see a little softening in China. What you see is a growing middle class outside of the United States, which are huge consumers, especially in India and that area of the world. And up in our area, what Virginia has been doing is really cleaning the clock of Maryland with their NIH and biomedical research. More of that's been moving over to Northern Virginia. So we get a lot of what we need to have, climate-controlled warehousing and facilities to ship pharmaceuticals and new drug products back and forth between Northern Virginia and mainly India. The other thing we've seen in the belly cargo load is you've seen the huge increase of the Middle East airlines, Qatar and Emirates, coming in. And they're hauling a number of new products. The other thing is that, talk about limitations in that, is our road infrastructure. 95 and I-81 and 64 and all those, the airport and its customers are really a lot of the same customers that are going to the port down here. And in Virginia, we've just done a horrible job at connecting those and creating a network of roads that works well. And so what happens is when you have air cargo, which is generally, it represents maybe 2 to 3% of total cargo, but represents over 40% of the total value of cargo, that it needs to get there quickly and needs to get out, and that's the pharmaceuticals. One big business that we picked up were flowers. If you bought a fresh flowers in Norfolk or in Northern Virginia, generally it would come in through Miami and then get trucked up. Nowadays, we do over 20,000 tons a week coming in from Ethiopia and Holland. So fresh roses that are cut in the morning in Ethiopia are sitting at the flower shop in the afternoon within 24 hours. And that kind of a business, the real quick ones, a big turnaround. But the dollar has not helped us unless you're a tourist. But with the road improvement is what we really, really need.
I'd like to throw the following question up for the panel. Tell us how your company, we talked about the federal government, is affected by trade promotion at the federal level. I'm looking at trade agreements, NAFTA. Anybody like to respond to that? Go ahead.
Well, I'd defer to the two men to my right first.
All right. Bjorn?
Well, I think I've mentioned earlier, anything that helps give us a competitive advantage or level the playing field obviously is beneficial for job creation and the export piece in the U.S. So anything that supports us there, makes our life easier, reduces our cost is what we would be supporting.
So you're specifically about trade promotion?
Yes.
Yes. Again, we have programs in place. We have a federal checkoff program that's producer paid to help promote pork products, meat products globally. The producer checkoff program is that red check you see on TV sometimes when there's a commercial. But also we have federal funding that helps promote generic funding of pork products, meat products globally as well. So.
Great. Now, we talked about the federal government. We heard about sequestration. I know it's the political season. Any comments or views on the potential impact of sequestration?
Clark, just to follow on the other comment.
Sure.
For the Port of Virginia, it's really important to have open trade agreements so that, because you can read the report, the more open our trade agreements are, that creates more jobs here in Virginia. So across the port, we want to make sure that we have equal access and we support the free trade or the open trade agreements. Secondly, we need the federal government also to honor some of the commitments for programs that have existed that have been in flux. The Ex-Im Bank has been something that's helped create jobs in manufacturing here, and it's been kind of it's not funded right now, and it's a self-funding program. We also need to have some of the critical infrastructure to supply the demand to be supported by our federal partners equally, so it's not all on the backs of the local taxpayers here. We need to get some of those federal funds back. And then sequestration, we can't run fast enough.
From a Northern Virginia standpoint in the airports, our biggest problem with the federal government is, as John said, maintaining their commitments. We have the trade agreements, we have everything, we bring more trade in, we bring more passengers in that, but Customs and Border Patrol have to have the agents to clear the cargo. They have to clear the passengers. What we run right now up there in Virginia, I mean, last summer, there were 5-hour waits to clear customs in New York. We had over 2.5 at Dulles, and we were good, only because we were Washington. But their same agents are running back and forth between the cargo end and the passenger end, trying to get stuff cleared. So we have a big problem with that. With sequestration, we've had a lot of push up in Northern Virginia, and we're pretty much similar here, dependent upon the federal government, and ours is more than just DOD, but federal government in general. The idea is, and Dr. Fuller at George Mason has been working hard on trying to coalesce a group up there, because we have a ton of foreign corporations and U.S. major corporations up there, but their focus has been less directed towards Washington. The focus has been internal among them and actually overseas, where this study shows things are growing. They've recognized that, they're quick to react to that, and so I see us weaning off of the federal government and looking more towards Europe and India and the Middle East, where the growing middle class is coming.
Thank you. We have a lot of state and local leaders here, so I'll ask this question. In your views, what can be done at the state and local level to increase and support trade?
We'll start at that end this time.
All right, General.
The biggest thing that I think the state can do is get active in transportation. You know, it is just amazing to me how long it takes to build a road in Virginia. And the Bi-County Parkway is one that would connect 95 up through to 66. That would make it really nice and convenient to go back and forth to the port. I know our friends in Maryland are actively lobbying against it, because their fear is that the bulk of their cargo that's coming in from the Midwest, instead of going to Baltimore, will end up coming down to Virginia. Well, good. Let them compete. The point is that we've got to get some relief. You can't have trucks just sitting on 66 and 81 and bypassing us, because right now, to develop a real air cargo presence in Virginia, most of that cargo is bypassing us and is heading up to New York City. That's the old standard one with the consolidators. To get a consolidator, which is somebody who's got a couple really large airplanes, it's total cargo. To do that, we've got to have an effective way that they can bring that truck into Dulles and load it and ship it out. Well, right now, and it's hard to believe, if you're sitting on 81, it is easier for that trucker to go in the middle of New York City than it is to come to Dulles. And that's a sin for Virginia.
Mike?
No, I echo your words on transportation for someone who spends considerable amount of time driving from Williamsburg to Smithfield, and also from Williamsburg to Washington, D.C. So certainly transportation is key. We also work with Secretary of Agriculture, Office Todd Haymore, on a lot of trade missions, bringing foreign buyers to the state of Virginia. Those things are important as well. We just hosted a group from Cuba last week at Smithfield, a new emerging market perhaps for us. So these type of exchanges on more marketing promotion side are also very important to us.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say I think both Virginia and the local authorities have been extremely supportive, and we'd really like to recognize that. It's a great state to be in. I'd maybe point out two areas. Transportation is obviously mentioned a few times, but I'll have to mention it again. We obviously export, and that's important, but we also deliver our product to the rest of the U.S. out of our manufacturing site right here. And so for us to be able to get that cargo out efficiently and reliably is part of our cost structure and part of our service promise to our customers. So doing something to improve that growth system, especially if we consider growth going forward, is going to be really key. So that investment is key for us. A second point I would like to highlight is maybe education, and we have a phenomenal environment here around education. But there is no reason why we shouldn't, for example, have the best educated people for a manufacturing environment here in Virginia. So more around educating people specifically around high qualified manufacturing positions. That would be something that would also support us and other exporters.
We've talked about the lack of infrastructure investment in roads and infrastructure across the United States, and particularly here in Virginia. I think we're blessed to have leaders that get it. Virginia is trying to move forward quickly, but a lot of these projects have been deferred so long, and they take so long to permit and get through the process. And we've got to try to see where we can streamline portions of those projects to bring them on stream a little more quickly. For the port, we have to dredge our harbors to go 55 feet and go wider and deeper and safer. Well, the study portion of that, it's a 9-year process. You know, even if you had the full funding and were ready to go, it's 9 years. Well, if you're trying to drive jobs and outrun sequestration and the negative impacts, we need to accelerate some of these projects. So I guess there would be, do we have a national freight policy? Do we have a policy that will support speeding up critical infrastructure that needs to be done for the benefit of the American worker and for Virginia as a whole?
Clark, I want to add to what Bjorn said. He brought up a very good point about education. I just had the opportunity to lead the National Pork Board on our 10-year long-range study for the pork industry. One of our concerns is enticing young people to enter into agriculture, whether it's pork, whether it's meat, whether it's poultry, raising corn, raising soybeans. So again, the importance of us working with our land-grant school, Virginia Tech, on encouraging young people to enter agriculture as a field. It's very, very key for the future of agriculture in this country and the state of Virginia's agriculture industry, that we excite people like my children to enter agriculture as a career. And I think Bjorn brought up a very good point about the education factor.
Well, we've got about 9 minutes left, and I'd like to finish up by, we're talking about a lot of things, but as you sit here today, take a few seconds and just tell us what you think. What are some of the opportunities that you see as you review this study and you review your business that we face in international trade in Virginia, and how you look forward to the future of transacting business in the Commonwealth? We'll start with you again.
Okay, thank you, Clark. We'll hand it off in just a minute. You know, I think we talked about the ability for the larger ships to call the East Coast is going to create a unique opportunity to catapult the Commonwealth and the Port of Virginia to this next level. Because you will have such large vessels coming in, it will create opportunity for import, for export, and now we have to make sure we got the arterial flow in place to drive that cargo inland. So we're going to continue to work with the railroads to accelerate the ability to move cargo inland. We're going to continue to work with the river to run more cargo by barge up to Richmond so we get it off of the roadways. We're going to look at other spots where we can have a leapfrog, where we can use a logistical supply chain to get those large amounts of cargo that are going to come on these ships, and they are coming. So the opportunity for us is build the port now that can handle the cargo and the ships that are coming, and that will induce more people to do business in Virginia, to export through Virginia, and to build their manufacturing facilities in Virginia. So to me, we just got to get moving.
Well, I would say obviously every challenge is an opportunity in its own right. So everything we've been discussing here as a challenge obviously presents on the flip side of that a big opportunity for us. Here in Hampton Roads, here in Virginia, we actually have a lot of things in place already. I mean, we have a great port, we have established businesses, we have access to great skilled people. And we were talking about sequestration. We obviously have access to all the military personnel that are looking for the next step in their career. So when we talk about skilled workforce, we have an advantage over other parts of the nation. So, you know, my perspective here is, as much as we're discussing challenges, we need to flip those around and talk about them as opportunities. But I think, John, you mentioned time is going to be key, and whoever gets this right first is going to be winning. So that's our task.
Mike?
I think, the study obviously talked a lot about, rising middle class worldwide, not only in Asia, but other parts of the world. And again, that's something that we need to, take advantage of, and new markets, such as South Africa, India, some of these things. I think our message from Smithfield is let's be sure we produce a product that the market wants. Today, we raise pigs that have special feed for special markets. And we cut products, we produce sausages and bacon for special markets with special ingredients, and we cut our product, we fabricate our carcass into pieces that foreign markets want. So this is the biggest mistake that many exporters make, is trying to deliver cars to a market with a steering wheel on the left when they want one on the right. And that's something, Smithfield, we really engage with the customer and give the market what they want. And make sure our workforce understands the importance. And these markets, very high quality is very important, especially to Japan, to China, these key markets.
I think what I got out of the study and what I've heard here is the same. It drives to the common point that, we ought not to be satisfied with a 2% growth. That's anemic, and that's just totally unacceptable for this country and this region. So how do we get out of that? The only way we get out of that is to get the permitting process that John talked about. Why does it take 9 years to dredge, a port that's already there? Why does it take as long as it takes to permit a road? Why does it take as long as it takes to move a utility? We need to get the state, local, and federal governments together if they're really serious about driving, economic benefits from this, and start doing something positive to get these things streamlined. The antis can shut down anything, and we've got to get over that. We've got a growing population. We're losing it. As you look at the rest of the world, our middle class segment is just dropping off the chart. And the only way to reverse that is to have the opportunities. The opportunities are here. We've got the workforce. People will be here. We just have to make it available to them.
Well, panel, thank you very much. Please join me in thanking our great panel today.